Most Americans believe that dangerous human experiments are something that only happened in dark foreign regimes or distant wars, far away from their own homes. But what if the truth is far more uncomfortable? What if some of the most shocking human experiments in history were conducted not in secret enemy laboratories, but inside American hospitals, schools, and neighborhoods on American citizens themselves? This is not a conspiracy theory. This is documented history. And for decades, the people involved were never told the truth. During the Cold War, fear ruled everything. Fear of nuclear war. Fear of falling behind the Soviet Union. Fear that if America did not understand radiation fast enough, it would lose global power forever. In that atmosphere of panic and urgency, ethical boundaries quietly disappeared, and ordinary civilians became test subjects. After World War II, the atomic bomb had changed the world forever. The explosions over Hiroshima and Nagasaki showed America the unimaginable power of radiation, but also how little scientists truly understood it. How much radiation was too much? What happened inside the human body days, months, or years after exposure? Could radiation be controlled, measured, weaponized, or even used medically? The government wanted answers fast. Animal testing was considered slow. Computer models didn't exist yet. And the pressure to compete with the Soviet Union pushed scientists toward a terrifying conclusion. To truly understand radiation, they needed human data. Across the United States, secret radiation studies began appearing in hospitals, often funded by the Atomic Energy Commission and approved at the highest levels. Doctors injected radioactive substances directly into patients' bodies. Plutonium, uranium, radioactive iodine. The patients were not volunteers. Many were poor. Many were elderly. Some were terminally ill, but many were not. They were told vague lies. That the injections were vitamins. That the procedures were experimental treatments. That the tests were harmless. In reality, the doctors were measuring how radiation traveled through organs, how it damaged bones, how it stayed in the body. And no one asked for informed consent, because that concept barely existed yet. Perhaps one of the most disturbing chapters involves pregnant women. In several studies, expectant mothers were fed radioactive substances without being informed. The goal was to see how radiation passed from mother to fetus. Doctors tracked miscarriages, birth defects, developmental delays. These women trusted their doctors completely. They believed they were receiving routine prenatal care. Years later, some of their children developed cancers without ever knowing why. At institutions like the Fernald School in Massachusetts, disabled children became test subjects in radiation nutrition experiments. The children were fed radioactive cereal as part of a so-called science club. Parents were told the program would help their children and improve their nutrition. What they weren't told was that radioactive traces had been added to the food, allowing scientists to track how radiation was absorbed into growing bodies. The children had no choice. The parents were never informed, and the long-term consequences were ignored. Radiation experiments also targeted groups considered acceptable risks. Military personnel were deliberately exposed during nuclear bomb tests, standing miles from ground zero as explosions lit up the desert sky. Prison inmates were offered small incentives to participate in radiation studies, often without full explanations of the dangers. Low-income hospital patients were chosen precisely because they were unlikely to question authority. In each case, the same pattern repeated. Trust was exploited, power was abused, and secrecy was protected at all costs. You might wonder how thousands of doctors, scientists, and officials stayed silent. The answer lies in fear and normalization. At the time, radiation was seen as modern, scientific, even exciting. X-rays were used casually. Radioactive products were sold to the public. Long-term dangers were downplayed or ignored, and questioning government research during the Cold War could label you as unpatriotic or worse. So silence became routine. Decades later, documents were quietly declassified. Journalists began connecting dots. Families began asking questions. Survivors started telling their stories. Some remembered strange injections. Others remembered unexplained illnesses. Many realized they had been part of experiments without their knowledge. Public outrage slowly grew. But by then, many victims were already dead. In the 1990s, the US government finally acknowledged that unethical radiation experiments had occurred. President Bill Clinton issued a public apology, admitting that American citizens had been wronged in the name of science and national security. But apologies could not reverse cancer. They could not bring back lost children. They could not erase decades of suffering. And compensation was limited, delayed, or denied for many families. These experiments raise a question that still matters today. How far should governments be allowed to go in the name of progress? Who decides whose life is acceptable to risk? And what happens when fear overrides humanity? Because the truth is, these experiments did not happen because scientists were evil. They happened because systems allowed ethics to be suspended, quietly, legally, and repeatedly. This story is not just about radiation. It is about trust. Trust in doctors. Trust in institutions. Trust in the idea that authority always protects the people. History shows us that trust, when left unquestioned, can become dangerous. And the victims of these experiments were not enemies. They were Americans. The next time someone says, "Something like that could never happen here," remember this story. Because it already did. And history only stays buried, as long as no one tells it. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more untold history stories they never taught you in school.